Got the motion to call the meeting to order.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are in session now, so let's begin.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the first of your new workshop formats, and this was intended to be interactive at TechWorks in a less formal setting, but due to the coronavirus, we are not allowing the public to be here other than specific applicants here that have business for you to consider. We are live streaming this. We would not have live streamed it from TechWorks, so in order for the public to be able to hear what we're doing, we are live streaming it. So that's why we're meeting at City Hall, and it's going to look like a council meeting, but it's going to hopefully feel a little bit less formal. It certainly looks different than normal. For those of you listening at home, we're practicing social distancing, so we've got the chairs set 6 feet apart, so we only have 4 people in the audience. And what you decided at your retreat from, I guess it was a week ago, but feels like months ago, is that you wanted staff to do a brief overview of each agenda item. And so most of these are, in fact, all but one are planning. So we'll have Shelley just give you an overview. You can ask her questions, and certainly you have representatives from the various parties here that you can ask questions. And we had 2 people from Essex Homes who are trying to call in, but it doesn't appear that the call-in option is working.
One of them can call in on that one. Just tell them to dial the number. Yeah.
So when we get to Essex Homes, which is number 4, if we don't have somebody from Essex Homes on the phone, I suggest we just defer that to a future workshop.
Sure.
But we will see if we can get there. So the first item is something that we've talked about, I think at least on my emails to you. It's a follow-up from the major development plan for the River Mist development, which is between Bowen and Bellwood Drive. And I will turn it over to Shelley to talk about where we are regarding the railroad crossing agreement.
Yes. So this development was a major development plan that was approved by City Council for an 86-lot single-family residential subdivision off South Point Road. You may recall that we recently approved a time extension for the property owner to allow them additional time to try to work out the railroad crossing. So as you can see from the site plan, the lower right, and you have more information in your packet, there are 12 lots that are what we call on the riverfront side that needs to be accessed by the road crossing the railroad. Norfolk Southern has changed their policy. They will no longer enter into a crossing agreement with a homeowners association or a private entity. They will only enter into a crossing agreement with a municipality or NCDOT. So the applicants are here, first of all, to share this information. The agreement is attached in the packet. Their options to move forward with the project as is of course, if the city will enter into an agreement with the railroad for the crossing, then they could move forward as approved. If this is something the city has no interest in, or as such, then their only option is to modify their major development plan to remove the waterfront section of their development. They do have enough open space and tree save area within the bulk, the remaining portion of their development if the other portion is removed. So they're here to gauge the council's interest in an agreement, and has been meeting with The attorneys and staff have been meeting over the past couple of months, so we're sort of looking for direction on this.
I know for our homeowners association, we have had to pay an annual payment. So we're
Right.
talking about something in that situation as well then, or not? But this have changed the policy.
They won't enter into any agreement whether they pay that annual fee or not with a HOA. It would be with the municipality.
They're still expecting an annual payment from an entity then, if we're the entity?
That I cannot answer. I don't know if that was called out in the draft agreement. There
Okay.
is,
The draft agreement makes it seem as though, since they'd be entering into the agreement with us, we'd have to pay the money, and then pursuant to what I've read, we would be reimbursed by the developer, but I do have some questions of my own,
Okay.
a lot of questions.
Okay.
But, so the expectations were, when this agreement was entered, that the homeowners association could enter into, so these are changed circumstances. I know it's an imperfect analogy, because this is not a contract, it's regulation, but, you know, sometimes you sort of take the risk that the deal's not as good as it was when you made it. But if these are generally changed circumstances, you know, that's a little bit more understandable. Do we have any unsignalized railway crossings in city limits at
Yes,
this
we do.
point? The one on Lake Shore? Lakeview?
Yeah,
Okay.
Lake Ridge, actually.
Lake Ridge, okay.
I think do we have others or not? I don't know.
Yeah, there's one at down 6th Street,
Okay.
you go down to 5th Street.
And the crossing,
That one's been closed, Mayor.
That's been
the one
closed.
down here.
That's right, that's been closed, you're right, a couple of months ago.
the crossing would have to be built, is that correct? There's not a road there now?
That's correct.
Okay. And who would, I'd assume we'd have to build it then?
No, the developer would build it.
Okay.
There isn't a developer though, right? There is a developer, okay.
How often is the track used?
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask the applicant to come up. I know you looked into that and has some additional information regarding its use into the future.
Does the developer own the property or is it still bank held?
We own it.
Okay.
Did you want to answer some of the questions?
I'd be happy to address any questions. I've tried to go over this some with parks. This rail terminates at the Allen Steam Station, and it's used today solely to supply coal for the steam plant. That
Which-
will be taken out of service
Yes.
by 2024.
Yeah,
2024?
yeah.
2024, but they do have to deal with the coal ash. And they don't know yet exactly how the coal ash is going to be handled. They want to do it on site, and they're going through hearings now about that, to build a landfill, a lined landfill, move the coal ash on site and not haul it off. If they do haul it off, they will do so by rail because the area is heavily residential. They don't want to take trucks through the residential areas. In response to Ms. Stowe's question, I think the railroad requires the applicant to do two things. One is to make an application. And we haven't been able to give you a specific agreement because they will not draw the agreement until the application is made, and they require their own people to do the agreements. So the developer has agreed to front the cost of that, which is estimated to be about $15,000.
Okay.
The payment that I think Ms. Stowe is referring to is that the railroad now requires specific insurance limits. And so the developer has agreed to pay up front the estimated premiums for 15 years, thinking that that would pretty well cover the use of this track. We've also given you examples. I went up NC Highway 115, where the Norfolk and Southern freight line goes from Charlotte above Mooresville. And there are numerous crossings. I mean, there must be 50. And I gave you examples of 3 that are heavily populated.
Yeah.
One is an intersection in the town of Davidson, about half a mile or less from downtown. And it's not a regulated crossing. It's just like these other crossings. Another one is to a large subdivision, much larger than what we anticipate here. And then the third one was just to a general large industrial residential area. And I thought those would be good examples of what's been used in the past. Now, those probably were done before they ever required a crossing agreement. And these are old. They've been there a long time. But the point is that the risk seems to be very minor. I mean, these are heavily populated areas. They're not regulated crossings. About the only ones that are regulated are actual state roads where you have public schools, like Bailey's Glen, for example. There are at least 3 crossings over this tract. One you referred to, we've given you pictures of all 3 of them. Another one was a private person who had applied to the railroad cross, but it's been a long time ago, back in the 50s. And then the third one is the one closest to the, and I forget the name of the road, but it's in the material. But it's the one that's closest to the steam plant, and that road probably services about, or that crossing probably services about 14 homes. I counted the mailboxes, and they were on the other side of the railroad track. So it seems that this is a minimal risk. We think that although the developer will make some money out of the 12 lots, I mean, there's no question about that, but the use of the lake enhances the quality of life for the people who will be living on the west side of the railroad track. And that's really, I think, what this is as much about as anything. It's not so that we can make more profit. We will, hopefully, but or at least the developer will.
So there's public access on the other side of the track for all the neighbors?
For these neighbors,
That
yes.
green lot is,
You see, it's 86 lots, and 12 of them are located east of the railroad track. And when you, under your ordinance, when you have a lake development, you have to provide open common area. And that's what the green areas are to the east of the railroad track.
But would that be available for everybody in the whole neighborhood?
Yes,
Okay.
it would be. And that's what I say, it enhances the quality of their lifestyle, because they would have direct access to the lake.
Right.
Well, you did attach an agreement that was done with
That's right.
Selma in Alabama, and you said, well, I understand that you can't draft, they won't draft this until they're,
It's a chicken and an egg.
Yes, and the memo says, well, we'd track the Selma agreement in every material way. It did seem to me as though there'd be some things that are different between our situation and Selma. I saw a reference to a gate in the Selma agreement, as well as two insurance policies, not one. So that was...
Well, it's 2 different coverages, but I think it's one policy.
Okay.
That's the way I interpret it. You have a 2 million and a 6 million. We cover both of those.
Because, I mean, basically, what I look at and what came to mind reading all this is I understand that circumstances have changed And, when this came together, you all, the HOA can make application for the crossing or however, and everything will be fine, and now that's not the world that we live in anymore, and so you'd be asking us to make this application for you, and as I'm fine to, I'm not averse to doing that as that's the way it needs to be done, but I don't want to be out anything from the city's perspective as a result of this. I want to make sure that if we get into this agreement, there aren't going to be anything where we end up having to pay more or be out of pocket anything, because it's really would just be doing a favor to make this feasible. Whereas, if everything had been according to plan when we had originally approved the development, we would have washed our hands of it, and you'd be off on your merry way. And so that's my concern is, I'm open to doing this because it can't otherwise be done, but I just want to make sure that we're not out anything because of it.
Let me ask you a quick question. Of the examples that you cited, I guess in support of this crossing in Davidson, you cited an industrial site and one in a neighborhood. The one you cited in Davidson, did Davidson assume the liability in a similar way, or are you just citing it as this is an example of a
I cited it as an example. We asked Norfolk and Southern for copies of crossing agreements by other municipalities. They did not provide one from Davidson. I assume the reason for that is that it's so old. It's just been there so long. But I cited it as a populated area where you don't have, gates, and it's a minimal risk. I mean, this is a very populated area right there near downtown Davidson, and these railroad crossings, they just have stop signs. But it seems that when you look at all these examples, there's very little risk.
Well, is that true that, there are a lot of unsignalized crossings, I've seen them, but they're basically all, that I remember, are kind of rural.
These are not rural.
They were at one time, if they're old, they began as rural, right?
They could have been, yeah.
Could have been.
They're there today, and all three of those are heavily dense areas. I mean, residential and industrial.
Well, I mean, just because they're not signalized and they're heavy areas, that doesn't mean it's a best practice. It means it's just the way it is, and they have not signalized it.
Well, I think the track is very similar to this track. That's a freight track that's, as I understand it, is a backup, and they've been trying to use that for light rail for years, and Norfolk and Southern won't let them.
Let me ask the developer a quick question. You're going to pay the premium for 15 years?
Yes. Pay to your trust account.
They pay the premium, but we bear the liability, right?
So, I totally agree with Jim. What's our risk here as we go forward? So we're going to have our known knowns, we're going to have our known unknowns, then we're going to have our unknown unknowns. And so there's a group of things that we're trying to figure out. Is there a way to attach that premium post of 15 years to the HOA's liability versus the city's liability? Can we have them pay that premium?
Or what about the whole thing? The 15 years plus...
They could just fund the HOA, maybe.
The HOA will fund it every year. It'll keep making a kitty, so to speak. So once the 15 years is over, they'll have enough supply backup to keep paying it going forward.
Got it. Okay. That was... I don't know what the other expenses are.
I had a question.
Okay, one of the risks that you take is that the railroad can change the rules, which they've done here. They've done it in our neighborhood. All right, so we finally, in our neighborhood, paid a chunk of money to cover whatever they wanted. So the Class A railroads, as the airport authority people told me, they're only second to God. So, and I'm not being facetious, they said that the Class A railroads are in control of so much. So the risk, more that we take is that they may change the rules at some point. So as long as we have the monies covered by the HOA, then that's a big issue to me. So The stop sign part of it, that's part of what they've done in any neighborhood. They're not going to signalize, you're really not going to be allowed to signalize because of the lack of number of people crossing. So you've got a whole different situation with what Richard's discussing. But I think the money piece of it is one of the things that we've got to be very careful about.
One of the things that is troublesome about that is, once they sign the crossing agreement, I'm not sure how they can change the rules. Parks United.
Well, you'd have to read the crossing agreement to see if it lets them do that.
But a crossing agreement is an agreement, and I'm not aware that there's a provision in there that they can unilaterally make the change.
I think they can make a change in the money piece of it, yeah.
So can we get the agreement and then vote on that?
What he said, we've got to apply to see what it is. So I guess from that standpoint, we need to at least look at that part of it.
You have to pass it.
And with respect to Mr. Heffern's comment.
You don't have to pass it, you can, hold on a sec, you don't have to pass it, to see what's in it, like.
I was just being.
I know, but like, couldn't we like just move the ball and then get the agreement back, and then if we're not comfortable with it, just vote no then? Because how could we can't vote on the agreement if we don't have it, all we'd be voting on is applying for the agreement.
Yeah.
Right?
I do have a question about the money, and particularly the calculation, because just so I understand how the insurance would work, it sounds like you're going to make a lump sum payment into a trust account, and then we'd pay the insurance out of that account. So, and it also, if my math is right, it looks like the way you calculated the amount for that funding is that you just took the premium from this year, multiplied it by 15, and said that's going to be the insurance premium?
That's right, that's all we could do at this point.
Well, my concern with that is that if I'm looking, I mean, all I got here is what appears to be the deck page, but it's talking about a non-admitted company, which makes me think that this is an excess policy, which my experience with those is that the pricing on those can vary significantly from year to year. So I would be very concerned that, you know, the price now is not going to look anything like what the price in 15 years will be.
That's a possibility, of course, and we could always provide that the homeowners association would cover the difference. I don't think that would be a problem, because I don't think they'd be talking about that much money.
Yeah. You mean recover it from the builder in 15 years?
But with
The
the homeowners
homeowners, let's say
association.
the premium went up $500, the HOA would chip in the $500 to make the premium whole.
Gotcha.
On the 14th year, whatever year
Yeah.
the funds would run out, the HOA would take over.
You're right. You can't use linear math on premiums.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. And we
Well,
also-
especially on a policy like this, I mean, excess and surplus is basically the wild west of the insurance world, so we can't make any straight line assumptions about anything in this policy, because they could completely change the rules next year. And even, I mean, I would...
And they always have issues as to when they kick in and when they...
Right, and sometimes you even have things like deductibles on the liability portion and stuff like that, so like even if something does happen, we could still end up out of pocket if we've got a fronted deductible for a loss. So, I mean, before agreeing to this, I would want to make sure the Parks has an opportunity to review the policy, because I also see there's a lot of endorsements on this policy that could, I mean, I have no idea what they mean, but they could significantly alter the terms and conditions of the coverage.
I guess the only way we're going to find out is to make the application and then have you review it. Otherwise, we're not going to know the...
Do we have to be the holders of the insurance company? Or of the insurance policy, or can somebody else be the holder of the insurance policy? And we just be listed as a
Like an additional insurer, named insured.
Well, I think if we're the applicant, then
I
that's
think if we're the applicant, we are
Policy would
applicant of
be
record.
issued.
Well, could we require somebody else, the developer, the HOA, to take out the policy for our benefit?
because we're applying for the crossing, we're not applying for the insurance.
Right.
Those are two separate
So then,
items.
like, the insurance doesn't even become our problem.
That's right, that's what I'm thinking, is
Yeah.
they apply for the insurance, and they list the city of Belmont as a co-insured.
But once again, I don't think we're going to find that part out until we apply.
That's
So they're
possible.
saying it. Yeah.
Well,
I
part
mean,
of
that just takes all the risk Mark's talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Away from us, so.
I don't know if the railroad will, have you explored that with them at all?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That application for insurance by a third party.
I think the railroad would expect the city to apply
I
for
do too.
coverage and pay the premium. And what we will do is to do everything we can to provide that this is a no-cost deal to the city. And we would front the premium for 15 years and then try to work out with you whatever would satisfy the city that we have made up any difference through the assessments of the homeowners association. I don't think it's going to be that big a deal. I mean, they have these policies with other places, and that doesn't seem to have been a problem. With regard to Mr. Hefford's comment, the only other possible liability is that the developer builds the road, and the city has to maintain 15 feet on each side of the track, which will far more be covered by the taxes than whatever the cost of that 15 feet will be. The railroad maintains the ties and the rails and everything from one end of the tie to the other. So the city has no responsibility for that at all. But the city would have 15 feet on each side of the ties.
Well, wouldn't we, I mean, would we be responsible for maintaining the road itself?
The road itself.
Once we take
But
it
it'll be a
over,
public road. I mean, it'll be built to standards.
I would,
Anticipated that would be a public road.
Right.
I'd suggest we just send our feedback to Adrian and we move on to the next item, because we've been on that for about 30 minutes.
So it sounds like there's at least consensus to move forward with applying for the agreement.
Yeah.
And then we get the agreement, which we would then bring back to you.
Yeah.
Do you want us to, I think that's the next step in the
And
process.
we'll pay for that.
Yeah,
Make that
absolutely,
clear.
yes.
I mean, we'll make that payment, and we'll be glad to do it up front.
I don't have any problem with that, because I don't think we're gonna know what we're looking at until we see it.
It's all
Sure.
hypothetical
Yeah.
until we get the
That
document.
makes sense.
As long as
Consensus to
nothing,
proceed with applying for that
That's right.
at their expense.
But you'll earn your money on this, Parks, because there'll be a lot of things to review, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe we can include Parks' time with the application.
Attorneys,
So this is just for informational purposes, we don't need a
Yes,
motion?
we don't need a motion, we'll
Okay.
just,
All
I've
right.
got consensus from you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, council. The next item for discussion is Stowe Botanical Garden sign. I want you to take note of the picture on the screen. That's their existing sign. They have two existing signs at their entrance. So representatives of the garden came to the city and shared with us they were doing a redevelopment of their entrance, I should say, an enhancement project of their entrance, and they were proposing two new signs. We looked at the city's codes related to signs. Our ordinance says they can have a maximum of 6 feet in height, 32 square feet in area. Now, their existing signs that they have up, they are non-conforming. They're almost 10 feet in height and about 21 feet in length. And as you can see, they use, besides the name of the facility, they use that as a banner display. So their proposed sign, you have an illustration in your packet, is just about 13 and a half feet in height and about almost 16 feet in width, which would be approximately 210 square feet. And again, their current sign is about 201 square feet. They are not proposing any internally illuminated sign. It's the same concept. There would be a sign with their facility name and a changeable banner area. Here in your packet, here's an illustration of their proposed sign. So they're just going taller, actually not as long. And so there's really three ways to go. So if the city would want them just to keep their existing signs, they can upfit them, they just can't change it in size or height because they're not conforming. Or we can actually process a conditional zoning for the property where We are allowed through a conditional zoning to modify the size and height of a sign through that process, and it would be specific to their facility, to their property. Or we can always modify the city's sign regulations, but what that does is that opens it up to any other civic use. Now, we could do that where it's allowed by right, or you could possibly allow it by CUP, so then they would come before you one case at a time. So there's really a couple of different ways to go. We wanted to check in with the council to see, there's been discussions about conditional zoning, the use of them, and see if there is interest by the council to support either a text amendment or a conditional zoning for their sign.
I don't want to go with larger signs. I know that option is not of interest to me. I think I'd be interested in the conditional use part of it, the first one, conditional zoning. Conditional zoning part.
Okay, so the difference in height between their existing sign and this one, this is about, from grade all the way to the top, about 13.5 feet in height. Their current sign is almost 10 feet in height, so you're saying, just want them to go ahead and propose as is, and then take it through conditional zoning?
That's what my thought would be. What about you guys?
I'm fine with that. I mean, I certainly have no problem with the conditional zoning for this. I mean, it's not compliant right now because of being grandfathered in, so it's not that. And it would improve the entrance for the reasons set forth in the memo, but I'm a bit I'd be hesitant to just amend an entire chapter.
For one project.
Yeah, and who knows what floodgate might be opened by that, so.
I would add on the conditional piece, that, I mean, you still can control how often it changes the digital component.
There's no digital.
At all?
Yeah, they're proposing.
So what's going to be on the gray part there?
So they're proposing it to be something like this, where that's just a banner. So right now, they put banners within their sign, and the executive director of the garden is here if you wanted to hear from him. But it's the same concept where they change out the banners. It will not be internally illuminated. It's not scrolling. That area is a banner inset that they would just put their events or any kind of advertising.
If at some point in the future they wanted to illuminate it internally or make it digital, they would have to come back and make another application?
If they go through conditional zoning, that is correct. That could be a condition of approval. So this would have external lighting, and that's typical of the signs you see now, but nothing internal, no movement.
I'm just curious, why do you want to change it? Do you feel like it's not getting enough exposure, the size it is, from the street?
So there's a couple of things going on, and my understanding is that this has been a discussion at the board level since before I arrived, that the entrance experience in general is not welcoming, and is not indicative of what one would want to experience at a botanic garden. And so as we were looking at redoing the landscaping in that area, the issues of the signs came up. So these are, as they exist right now, they're fairly dated. They were fine when they were put in 20 years ago and fit with kind of the rustic feel for that area of Gaston County at that time. But as we've started to have developments in the area, and certainly as graphic standards and things have changed, those expectations have changed as well. And if you drive down there right now, there's actually a change in elevation such that that's a beautiful picture. It shows up wonderfully. But as you're driving down at the speed limit of 45 miles per hour, as everybody does down there, you don't notice it immediately. And so what we end up having right now is people actually speeding by the garden and then slamming on their brakes, having to turn into some of the residential areas and things like that. So what this does is by elevating them, going up instead of out, it increases the visibility as people are coming down there, hopefully increasing the safety and allowing for people to slow down as well. So really trying to just update the entire area with that space.
Makes sense to me. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, so
So consensus to allow the garden to proceed with the conditional zoning application?
I would think so, yeah, for safety's sake too, you know. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so the next item is Belmont Abbey Temporary Housing.
Hold on.
Yes.
Zach, are you guys listening online, or do you actually need me to keep this unmuted so you can hear? Okay, well, we can hear you, so if you guys talk, we'll be able to hear you unless you mute yourselves.
Just tell them to be quiet.
All right.
All right, so we're doing Belmont Abbey.
Okay, so the item before you is temporary housing at Belmont Abbey College. So in your package, you'll find their proposal. As you are aware, the city approved some new student housing on campus. It is currently under construction. However, there are some delays due to various factors. The applicant reached out to us and asked if we could do temporary housing. A review of our ordinances found that we do not allow temporary housing unless it's tied to an individual single-family lot. You can do a manufactured house if there was some catastrophe and so forth. So other than that, there is no ability for us to grant this request. The proposed location, it's in your packet, is internal to the site. The options open, or of course there are three options. If there's no interest in or support in this, we just say we cannot approve any temporary housing. Or we can modify the land development code to allow institutional uses to propose temporary housing that could be done by right or by CUP. If you want each one of them to come before you and look at it individual basis. That institutional use could be Belmont Abbey College, it could be a hospital if something was happening there, or Sisters of Mercy. In the event there was ever a request like that.
Let me mention this for what it's worth. Years ago, when I went to the Abbey, we had mobile homes, trailers that students lived in while they were constructing the new dorms.
Oh, really?
And and they had no problems with those years ago. That was long before ordinances changed and stuff. But there wasn't any problem, and the kids were able to go to class and have a place to stay until the dorms got built.
What's the most restrictive, the conditional use permit? Because if we allow this one time, maybe you said they'd have to come before us each time.
Yes.
Okay, the other thing that concerns me, I want to, if we decide we want to go forward with this, is that we have a set limitation time-wise, because we're still stuck with the trailers at the high school and will be forever, unfortunately. And that's a very scary thing to
How do we define temporary?
Well, it's different for different uses. You mentioned the trailers at the school. They are supposed to be limited to a year, and they can ask for another extension. And as you can see, sometimes it's needed beyond that period. So typically a year, and we do offer time for an extension. We allow temporary offices for like construction sites, that type of stuff, but that's usually, that may be out there for 5 years, but that's tied to the development of a community. So it's a little different. So we can define it any way the council chooses.
Do we still have requirements? It seems like there was an issue with this a while back, and we required landscaping around these units? Okay.
Yeah, we can still require that. And
Well, I don't,
some
in this
screening.
instance, I don't really care about the landscaping. I agree with Martha, there has to be a hard stop on the conditional use as, when they are finished and ready to be populated, the new, that there is a certain amount of days for deconstruction and removal.
Well, the beauty is
would have to be
if
put in.
you want to go the path of a conditional use permit, so we modify the ordinance to allow it by conditional use permit. That means that anytime it's asked for, it come before the council and you can place conditions on it as far as the timing and look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I would prefer that, because, once something's up, people get the new buildings up, they say, well, you know what, this would be great storage, or this would be great.
You're right.
But I think we're gonna have to draw a hard stop on some things.
It's internal, so I don't mind the they're gonna be more picky about what it looks like than we are. We don't,
Yeah.
none of us are gonna see it, honestly. But
There's no point in planning things that are gonna be removed.
yeah, and I do like the hard stop. I think that should come with the CUP, and I think it should be a CUP just because for all the reasons you mentioned, it could be a hospital or Sisters of Mercy, and that does get closer to where we could see it, and so I prefer that come back to whoever's on council to make that judgment call at that point, so.
When the new dorm was built, the trailers were gone.
Mark, you good with?
Yeah, I think as long as we've got a hard stop.
We should define temporary for our code, I think, for temporary housing, what that
Yeah.
means from a timeline.
It is based on the intended use. It's in the ordinance, but we don't have one definition that defines all.
Have they indicated how long they're planning on needing these?
The applicant is here
Oh.
if you would like
Okay.
them to respond.
Yeah, if all goes as planned, right now, this building, all 5 stories, is tracking to be done about mid-December. So I'm talking a matter of 3-4 months. There have been discussions today about the virus and what's going to happen. We're a little worried about some lead times on some items coming from overseas, various materials of buildings. So I'd be comfortable taking that into effect, asking for 6 months.
Yeah, something like that seems reasonable.
As a result of the virus, is there going to be as much need for student housing?
Also a good question. I cannot answer that. I'm here representing the developer of the project. This is more our concern. And, the financial responsibility falls on us, not the Abbey. So this is just something we need to put in place now.
I'd just do it for a year. There's a lot of unknowns.
Well, you could do a 6-month with a 6-month rider on it.
Yeah. Automatic renewal or something.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's consensus to proceed, and I guess procedurally, you have to have the text amendment to allow the use, and then if the text amendment's approved, then the applicant can apply for the conditional use permit.
And the construction's coming along pretty good with the dorms too.
Yeah, if you drive by right now, they're got full first story.
Moving
lot.
fast.
The building's built, it's stacked up in Ohio, it's panelized.
Yeah.
It's going to move quick.
So,
Just hope the workforce is going to be.
yeah. So given the timeliness of this, do you mind if we run the text amendment process and the conditional use permit process concurrently?
That's fine.
Yeah.
And so it would come to you at the same council meeting, we just do the text amendment first, and then if you
That's
approve
fine.
that, have the CUP hearing.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thanks.
And thank you for
Thank you.
that another file.
Yeah.
Wow. Now you can take your plane.
I was watching your Twitter yesterday. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You take, have a safe trip back to Ohio.
Will do.
Okay, the next item is informational regarding a conditional zoning that is an application to modify a conditional zoning district for the McLean development. It has been filed. It represents Essex Homes and 8 other property owners. There is a violation in Phase 1 of the Conservancy where there are 9 lots where the homes encroach within the 22-foot front garage setback, area. It ranges from 1.5 inches to just over 3 feet on different lots. Again, 8 of the 9 lots are privately owned. The remaining lot is still owned by Essex Homes. When this first came up as a situation, we believe there was only 2 cases. These 2 cases went to the Board of Adjustment, and I know one of our council members was on the Board of Adjustment at that time, and the variance cases were denied. The findings could not be made, so that leaves 2 options: either modify each one of the homes for compliance or propose a modification of the conditional zoning district. You have a letter at your seat that was provided by the attorney representing Essex. They are proposing to modify the conditional zoning district. They are also proposing to give back to the community in the form of constructing a 6-foot wide sidewalk connecting the Conservancy portion of McLean with Daniel Stowe Botanical Garden and the trailhead at 7 Oaks Greenway. Part of the connection to Daniel Stowe Botanical Garden is under their ownership. A little of it, and the applicant has indicated they have reached out to Mr. Larkins and discussed the possibility of building this sidewalk connection to the garden. And the other portion from Conservancy to the trailhead at 7 Oaks is currently vacant under the ownership of the developer for McLean. And they are willing to allow the sidewalk connection to be built to the trailhead. With that, as you can see in the letter, they are also proposing, or will be proposing as it goes through the process, to modify the home under their ownership to make it comply, whether that means demoing and rebuilding or just modifying the front of the house. So we wanted to provide you the information, let you know that it's going through the process. It's scheduled tentatively for the planning board next month. That would be the April, and ultimately then come before council for a decision.
What was the 22-foot garage setback prior to the land use adjustment we had already done for this project?
Right, so the ordinance requires a 30-foot parking pad in front of a front-loading garage, so the driveway should be 30 feet in depth. There was some misunderstanding when it went through the process. They identified a 20-foot setback and built the infrastructure to meet that, and when they started filing permits, we said, well, wait a minute, your garage does not meet that 30 feet. So they came back before the council, modified their conditional district in the Conservancy, and overlaid to allow the reduction to 22 feet.
I was gonna say, this is familiar. They had a very similar situation a while back, is that right? In the Conservancy, where they had already cut lots, and they cut them the wrong way and put in some of the infrastructure?
That's the setback issue, excuse me, that we required them to, when they submitted their first zoning permit for a new house, we required the 30-foot driveway. They didn't have room for it. They only had room for a 20-foot driveway. So when we pointed that out, that's when they came back to you.
So we did 22 feet.
22, it's 22.
And then we also made stipulations for the HOA would have to control like garbage cans and cars over sidewalks and all that.
That's correct. They're enforcing any kind of encroachment.
But now it looks like we could go from 30 feet to 19 feet.
Well, this proposal would only affect the 8 lots that are privately owned. It would not be development-wide. It would not be any houses under construction or planned in the future. This would be limited to each individual lot that where the encroachment exists. So part of going through this process is, the property owners of these parcels are very concerned because right now they have a violation and they're concerned in the future when they go to sell the home. Well, there's a problem with their home, and unless it is somehow approved through a variance, which they cannot make the findings to be granted a variance or a modification of the conditional zoning, there would be this issue for the private property owner, again, other than modifying each home. And I believe we have the Essex attorney on the phone listening.
They're no longer on the phone, they're just listening
Okay.
via, because they couldn't hear.
Okay.
So if you have any questions, they can call in and
I don't-
leave them the answer.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with them doing what they want to with the garden. That makes really good sense. I think, in theory, doing what they should with the house where they are would be okay, but that does not make good common sense, because if we're not requiring all the other 8 to be done in the same manner, that does not make sense. I think we need to set a monetary amount or have them offer something toward parks, that kind of thing. But the other biggest concern that I have, if we have a developer or a home builder doing this, we're going to have to seriously think what we have in the way of options of, we do not want to do business with you again if you cannot do what you're supposed to and handle the situation. I know we've taken responsibility on our side to look at the plans, as the footprint and all that kind of thing, but this is a big issue to me, as far as if you're going to come into our town and do business with us and you're going to try to pull something over and you did not think that we were going to pay attention to it, that's a concern. And maybe that's not what happened, but it certainly comes across that way.
My understanding, I will say, in fairness, when they were before the Board of Adjustment, once they determined that this was the case, they brought it to our attention. It wasn't like we went out there and found it and
No, you're correct.
They
brought it to our attention.
And I'm not, I'm just.
I can understand, I wouldn't really understand it happening once, because like, measure twice, cut once, right?
Yeah.
But, this is the second time it's happened. It kind of feels like a pattern to me. But, and kind of to Martha's point, it really just kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth, where you've got somebody coming in who just can't abide by the rules we've got, and then basically we've got to come in and kind of fix their mess.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, so part of the testimony at the Board of Adjustment meeting, and I'm sure when it goes through the process, you'll hear at the public hearing, is it was tied to a particular model, and that's where they found these errors. It was the same model, and that apparently weren't being staked correctly by third-party surveyor, but they know they're responsible, and they said that up front at the meeting, that they're ultimately responsible for it. And again, we thought that there was just 2, they went back and checked every lot with that particular model and found these other homes, and they're already owned by private property owners.
Yeah.
All except one.
Yeah, and that's where I think I do distinguish.
Let me know when it's appropriate for me to chime in. This is Zach Moritz, the attorney.
That's the attorney.
Yes.
All right, go ahead, Jim.
Where I do think there's a distinction, Martha, is, we've got 8 homes that are owned by private property owners, and we can debate, I know it was debated at the Board of Adjustment hearing, whether there's any culpability, but certainly to the extent any were to exist, it's much less on them. I think, well, do they know what they were getting when they signed for the, I have much more sympathy for them, and I did at the Board of Adjustment hearing, because the house that Essex owns, there were 2 houses at the Board of Adjustment hearing. One was Essex owned, and one was already, I forget which of the 8 it was, but it was already privately owned. That's my impression, but I was much more sympathetic to them than I am to Essex Homes, and that's why actually what they proposed here is a little bit more in line with what my thinking was, because I don't want to put people out of their homes for, if they were all owned by Essex, I very well, hey,
Fix it.
yeah, this is twice, 2 strikes, you're a couple feet, you're a couple inches over the line, well, too bad, do what you have to do to fix it, but I'm much less of that opinion when it's dealing with private homeowners who'd have to put out of their house, I would hope not, maybe even reconstruct the entire house for a couple of inches. That seems to be what we say in the law, would be the elevation of form over substance. But when it comes to the developer itself, I have far less sympathy, and I know Ryan has been of that belief, and it seems like this goes a little bit further. I mean, I just want to find a balance here, because I understand what everyone is saying, and I know Adrian has weighed in on this. I don't want to put people out of their houses over, in some cases, like a couple of inches, albeit in other cases, a couple of feet, and make their lives a hassle, but at the same time, I don't want developers to think, well, we can do whatever we please, we don't need to be careful, we don't need to be worried about professional standards, because we'll just get, bailed out and do conditional zoning and fix our mess. Well, I'd like to, send some sort of statement that, this is unacceptable, and we're not going to just bail you out from your mistake.
Well, we had a chance to correct this at one time. And they came forward with those lots that were miscut, and they said, well, if you make us stick with what we have right now, we have to take away from the backyard. So, I thought what we were going to do is grant them forgiveness, I guess, instead of permission on those lots, but what happened, because they wanted it to be consistent with the rest of it, is that was granted to the entire 500 homes. Okay, so we gave them a huge pass there.
With a 22-foot setback.
Yeah, so now, it's happened again, and what bothered me about it is at that time, you go look at the ordinances, I mean, it was right there. And, these are professional builders who've done this before, and if there's any doubt, you look at the document, and here it is in a chapter, and here it is just below it. And if you're still fuzzy on it, you go to our staff and say, I'm not quite clear on these 2 chapters.
Yeah.
Can I address that, please?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
First of all, I know this is somewhat awkward for us being on the phone, so we really appreciate the city council's allowing us to approve this way. We have a couple of people that have had the flu. We have a couple of people who have close family members who are immunocompromised, so we very much appreciate it. The original changing of the setback from, I believe it was 30 feet to 22, had nothing to do with Essex Homes. That was before they were building in the Conservancy. That was a request by the developer, and really had nothing to do with us. I just want to make clear with that. This, what we're talking about now is a mistake. It was done by a third-party surveying company that stakes out the lots. A lot of builders use a third-party surveyor to pull the plans and actually pin where the corners of the houses should be. They do double-check that. How this got missed, we're still trying to figure out exactly, but the change to the 22 from the 30 was well before Essex was building in this neighborhood. It really had nothing to do with them, so.
What do you,
Excuse me, but they don't, that wasn't them, that part, anyway.
My name's Ryan. What do you think it would cost to fix all 9 homes and get them back to the appropriate setback?
Yes, and let me introduce who we have on our team on the call. We do have Jeremy Tessamali, who's the production manager, who's sort of in charge of making sure everything gets built properly out there. And then we also have Frank Henry, who is an independent engineer that I recommended to them that we bring in an independent third-party engineer to look at this, because I presume that question would probably come up. So, Jeremy and Frank, the question was, what would it cost to correct these, or what would be involved in correcting these setback violations? And as someone noted, they do range from 1.5 inches to 37.5 inches, so there is a bit of disparity there. But if Frank, Jeremy maybe could start, and Frank can chime in as needed from an engineering perspective. Jeremy, are you there? There you go.
No, we can't hear you very well.
A little bit of a lag.
Yeah, speak a little louder.
As loud as you can, Jeremy.
All right, I will. Hope this is loud enough.
Yeah, that works.
So I think I understood the question, just kind of the cost that would be incurred with attempting to not encroaching. And in several of the cases, with this compromising of the garage, would deem the garage not usable in a lot of ways by a lot of I think what we're getting in the structural constraints to this is with the bearing, that inches truly do make a difference when it comes to bearing, different folks with the code. Bearing on framing has to bear for 3 inches and 1.5 inches. When those things are out, I think you can have the structural integrity of the home from the footings all the way up to the roof structure. That's what $1 amount. Get the effect of being the visibility of the garage. We're no longer focusing on the top of the garage, which would be very difficult. And then tearing down the entire home, obviously, would be.
Can you just cut to the dollar amount, please?
Jeremy, did you hear that? He asked for an estimate of the dollar amount.
A complete tear down would be
Is that per house?
Is that for all 9 houses?
per each home.
Per each.
Couple hundred per each, okay.
And these homes are occupied, obviously, I guess as was clear, some for, a few years now by homeowners.
8 of the 9, yes, are occupied. I got an idea.
And Essex is,
I'm working on it.
they will fix that one.
So, all right,
Required.
thanks. All right, I got it. I don't support this recommendation.
So that feels like a slap on the wrist.
So, I'll make a proposal. I have thought about this, and had read the notes from some of the prior hearings, and spoke to some other folks. So, I sympathize with the 8 homeowners. Okay, so I'll just draw a clear distinction there. The Essex home, I don't sympathize with. The other thing is setbacks only benefit the people that live in the neighborhood. If we don't, us as council, if we don't live there, we're never gonna know, it's not gonna bother us, it's just not a big deal for us, right? We don't live there. The setbacks are there to make everybody's lives easier. So what I would suggest is, the sidewalks sound like a great solution, that works, but I would suggest the 9th home, they just tear down, and then instead of rebuilding it, maybe they just do a little pocket park right there on the site, and that'll actually benefit the neighbors, because if they contributed to our parks, we're probably not going to spend it inside the Conservancy. But if they just spend the money there and do a pocket park on that specific site, that would benefit all the homeowners right there, and leaves us out of it, and it's, and whatever that would cost, I don't know, but it would have to be cheaper than bulldozing 9 homes and rebuilding them, I would think. I'm not talking about like a $2 million park, but just a small pocket park there.
How big is that lot?
How big is the lot that we're talking about?
Those are not
Essex
big
is
lots.
lot 86, and
It's less than 10,000 square feet.
small.
So I've got,
The problem we have with that idea is that this Essex home is in between other homes. So I don't know that the neighbors on either side and behind it or across from it would necessarily agree to have a demolition occur there and have a park next.
so I've got a counter proposal on the park idea. They gave us 10 acres of land to develop a park, if my memory serves. Also help meet their green space requirements. I mean, I like your idea of a park, but I agree putting one between, a small park between 2 houses probably isn't ideal. Now, I like the sidewalks, but maybe we can also work on, I think Martha was saying, banking some money for a park, because while we do have the 10 acres, that's all we have. And it would be incumbent on the city to put in parking, paving,
And equipment.
shelters, and equipment, which is not going to happen anytime in the near future if left strictly to the city's financing. So maybe some sort of dollar amount could be affixed and held in escrow to create a park there, which will primarily be at the use of this neighborhood, just on a
We
grander,
don't really have any public parks down there.
on a grander scale. I mean, is that legal to do some sort of arrangement like that?
I agree to.
So do we want them to come up with a dollar amount, or how do we arrive at something?
Well, I mean, you're looking at
Make a proposal?
$200,000 per house times 9. I'm sure there's something within that number we can all agree on.
So that's 1.8 million. So anything less than that is to the builder's benefit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and you have to put people out of their houses, you know, and nobody's going to be happy. I mean, this is in addition to the sidewalks.
Right.
Yeah, and putting in a park like that's a pretty nice way of saying sorry.
Where's the park property at?
Across the road.
It's 10 acres right on the road front. It's
right
nice.
next to
Is that on the-
roundabout itself.
Is that on the CIP list at all?
No, it's
No.
across the street from the trailhead to the Seven
To
Oaks
the
Trail.
Okay. If we're gonna do that, I would just like the money to go for some sort of immediate impact for that property. So either clear cut and get some, we can put in a pavilion. I don't wanna just bank the cash for
No, we're-
5
you're talking
years,
about a long
like do
period of
something
time.
with that property
Yeah.
now, like with that money directly.
I want to say that the Parks Master Plan identified some ideas for stuff down there.
It's identified as a park, but it's one of those things that it's a new park and it's not a priority. We want to invest in our existing parks first.
I just don't want this money to get mixed up.
Yeah,
That's,
right.
just take this money, go clear cut it, put some picnic tables, pavilion up, whatever we wanna do.
Shelley, what are the high-end homes selling for out in this development, lakefront?
I'd have to,
Yeah.
I'd have to look up, in Conservancy.
They're not
there's
lakefront
no
Conservancy.
lakefront.
Well, I mean, in the whole
So-
development there.
Well,
Essex is not there.
Yeah,
Okay.
Essex is limited to
They're limited, okay.
Conservancy, so it's not in South Shore, there's
Okay.
custom builders, $1 million.
So do we want them to come back with a dollar amount, or what do you want?
I mean, Jim, not just because I proposed it, I mean, I think I like the idea. I mean, I think we've got land that we are going to have vacant for a long time if left to our own means.
I want some time to think about the whole thing before now, the next meeting. I'd like to hear what Adrian thinks about what we discussed today for the first time.
I think what we need to do as well is if this situation happens, we need to put some teeth into the penalties that are gonna happen the next time, so these developers can understand that they cannot make mistakes when it comes to our compliance with the requirements that we have.
And we have developed out of this, came a tightening of our process where we don't wait till the end to get an as-built, because then it's too late. Everybody's
Too
going
late.
vertical. So we require a foundation survey
Yeah.
up front. As soon as the foundation's done, they send in a foundation survey, and we give them an authorization to proceed with their construction. So, and that goes for any development now.
Yeah, we don't want to go through
Citywide.
this again.
No,
No sense in that.
Okay, so Adrian, what would be most helpful to you? Because it sounds like if we can come up with an amount of money and do at least some development of that park, that would be more amenable to this group.
So, in my discussions with the overall developer of McLean about the 10-acre city park, that, you know, at some point, they're going to officially donate the land to us, and then, you know, our initial plan in 2013 was then the city would build that park.
Right.
The park is not high enough on our priority list to build it now. Just operationally, we'd have to send staff that far down, and I'd rather keep them in the center part of town. So I'm in no hurry to get this park built. But if we did get a substantial financial contribution from Essex Homes to build that park, then you could certainly justify that. So I think that's a good idea. It benefits the residents of the Conservancy and McLean primarily, but also the city residents. by being a public park. So I think that's a good proposal, and I'll certainly work with Essex Homes. Hopefully they'll work with us.
I think it resolves the issue for a lot of people, including, I agree with you, I don't want to penalize the people who are occupying these homes, and they bought in good faith.
Let's think of it,
Right.
yeah, we're moving in the right direction, and I think we're moving collectively in the same direction.
I just want to get
Negotiate with them.
consensus from you that
Okay.
this is something that you're interested in hearing, as long as there's a viable solution.
And we're giving you
from
enough
Essex.
information to work from.
Yes.
All right.
And Mr. Moretz, you understand where we're coming from on this?
The audio quality is not the best, but I guess we understood that there is a park sort of in the master plan designated for this area, and you might prefer to see a financial contribution to the construction of that park rather than the sidewalk proposal that
In addition,
had made.
In addition.
It was an addition.
And it would be a substantial financial contribution.
Okay? We hear you.
Otherwise, you gotta tear them all down and build them in the right place.
Right. We hear you. Are there any other questions we can answer as far as how this
Thank you.
occurred, or the engineering involved, or that sort of thing?
No. Thank you.
All right, we appreciate y'all letting us attend via phone. Thank you.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, so the next item is Belmont Rowing Center. So this is an update before we come before you with a proposed amendment to the operating agreement with the city. Some of the changes in the operating agreement would be incorporating the new plan, which you have in your packet. We need to acknowledge the city will manage the construction of the public safety boathouse with the assistance of a grant from Lake Wylie Marine Commission. So there were some changes to the plan, and we're still fine-tuning the plan based on some feedback and just working with BRC's team. We actually relocated the coach's boat launch was originally proposed all the way down on the peninsula, and we were able to work with them to get it moved to the north area, away from the peninsula. And we relocated the public safety boathouse, and staff has met with Gaston County sheriffs, no. I'm
Gaston
sorry.
County Police Department.
Gaston County Police Department, as well as our fire department on the location of the boathouse to make sure we understand their needs. It's in the right location, in the right size, and that's moving along. And we've actually relocated the porta-johns as well. There was concern from community across the cove about the development. And so we just wanted to share this information with you before it moves forward for an amendment to the agreement.
We would have appropriate screening even with the porta-john, would we or not?
We would, yes, that's correct, including the parking lot. So the most, let me see if I've got it here if you want. Well, I wanted to show them the green, the colored rendering. So the community across the cove. So the closest item would be the parking lot on the, across the cove. And you have this diagram in your packet. We would have, like with all parking lots, screening around the parking lot, in the form of shrubs. We don't want to introduce too many, I don't want to say invasive species, but non-native species of plantings in the area. It has a good amount of hardwoods. We want to keep the hardwoods. It's real visible now because it's winter. But it does have a nice full canopy during spring and summer and until we lose the leaves. The relocation of the porta-johns went towards the Catawba Riverside near the boat launch, the coach's boat launch. The small square, which again you have the plans, is the public safety boathouse. Is the square item in the Catawba River, and then you have the other launches there following. So we're working with their team to ensure that it has as low impact as possible as far as visibility for the community.
And if I could, is it okay for me to make a couple comments right now?
Yes.
Just for the historical perspective, that is right across from my house. Over the years, we have had drug deals, overnight camping for a week at a time. We have had people drinking alcoholic beverages and yelling inappropriate things to children across the way, including mine and my neighbors. So this is the highest and best use of this property. We had asked years ago with the previous property owner if it could be a park, and we were told we were going to develop it. So we've been working with the rowing club, and certainly if we were going to do something that was not appropriate, I would be the first one to raise my hand and say this is not it. Unfortunately, the night that we were at the
Police department?
the Sports Hall of Fame banquet.
When your car got stuck in the mud?
Yeah, when my car got stuck in the mud. The homeowners association met, and so I think that unfortunately there were a lot of comments made and things like that, and people said, why was I not there? Well, I was not there because I was representing the city. So I've tried to get the information to the homeowners association, and that's why some of them will be listening at this point. But once again, we would not, if it's my neighborhood and across from my house, I don't want any of the bad things. The other concern was there's going to be a lot of noise, nighttime boating, this kind of thing, with the type of kayaks and shells you're looking at with this activity. That is not what you see. So I think there's just a lot of misinformation, and people were telling things that they did not have full information about.
Well,
So
does
just kind of bring you up to date about why we are where we are there.
Does it close at a certain time?
We were talking with VRC about park hours, and in fact, we talked to them about coordinating a gate up at the street to close that off in non-park hours.
And what about lighting? Like the basketball court lights go off, I think, was it 10 o'clock over in East Belmont?
Yeah, the only lighting here would be safety lighting for the road and around the parking
Piers.
lot if there's like early evening type of, they would be solar activated and full cutoff as well, so.
The screening you were talking about also, because I'm trying to envision it, I've seen it from the other side in the winter, and when all the leaves fall off and you can't see. The screening you're talking about, are you talking like evergreen type screening?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to build a wall because we still want people to be able to see what's
No, I
going
understand,
on over
but-
there. Like during the winter, if you had people camping up in there, you want to be able to make sure that it's safe.
Sure.
So the screening I'm speaking to is more of like shrubbery around the parking lots, and those are evergreen. But again, we don't want to introduce a lot of tree species in an area that it's not native to. You know, we wouldn't want to plant like Leland cypress or anything like that there.
And the other concern, evidently, that the neighbors voiced, once again, I was not at the meeting, was that they were concerned it was going to make the property values less. And this type of facility is not, and certainly any park we've built, we have not done anything that's not of high quality. So I think that, once again, there was just a lot of misinformation or not correct information out there.
Where are the porta-johns gonna go?
They're going to go right over in this area, right over here.
So that's across from
And
where
they'll-
the houses are.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the homes are over here. It was originally planned over here. We were going to screen them, but we all talked and we decided we'll move it over there. And then at some point, you know, this. Yes.
Not to interrupt you, but
Yes.
Basically are.
so for the people that are listening at home who
Yes.
can't see the screen,
Sorry.
the location of the porta-johns has been moved to closer to the river side than the cove side, and looks like a large stand of existing trees that will remain, so there'll be a large vegetative buffer of existing trees between where the porta-johns will be and where the cove is.
So there'd be
With
like no
Lakers
way to
Neighborhood.
see them from where that neighborhood is.
Not what you have, this tree here is the tree along the cove side, I'll call it. The porta-johns have been moved to Riverside, the east.
Yes.
And it's planned to be screened as well, so it's really, they're only going to be visible to people in the parking lot, people going to use them. And again, we moved the coach's boat launch was originally down in this area. We've moved it up so we could preserve the tree canopy and use this simply for a trail. Maybe put a picnic table back in here. So leave this as undisturbed and natural as possible and keep everything up in this area.
Oh, go ahead.
Let me ask one question. This has been going on for some time. You know, the initial rowing center was going to be by the Catawba River Bridge, and we ran into issues there about moving the boathouse and access to the water. We came up with this site. We had, several contracts that had to be reworded because there were disagreements about language, and several plans on this property and changes, I think, in roadway, surface type, or whatever. Are we moving toward a final document?
Yes.
Okay.
We hope so. We had, one of the issues was last summer, we were actually, after we did the amendment last year to add the public safety boathouse, we were ready to start the FERC process. And when we gave our documentation to Duke, they told us that they needed a lot more detail about shoreline stabilization. We had put what our engineers said would usually suffice in the past, which is where we were going to do it and generally what it was. They want to know the detail down to the level of exactly how many feet of riprap will be where and what type of plant will you use and how many and where. So we've had to get very specific, and in the meantime, we realized that there was a drought last summer, and the water level went way down, and we saw that the shoreline was undercut beneath a lot more than we realized. So we've had to really take a hard look at that, and we were working with our engineer. We've looked at several options to try to assess that. But I think we have now what we hope Duke will be okay with, and if the amendment is approved in early April, we would like to try to be in a position to start that FERC process right after that.
Good.
So what's exactly, I read this, I was a little bit confused by this agenda topic, so I read, all right, that's nice, and I knew that Martha had said that there had been some issues in her neighborhood, which now I understand better thanks to her explanation. But what are you seeking? Like, we're happy with the Second Amendment and you got our blessing, or is this just like reporting out, or what exactly are you looking for from us?
From staff's perspective, we just wanted to, we have new council members, and we wanted to update you on where this project is before the proposed amendment to the agreement came before you in a council meeting. So this is simply an update of where it is. There's been a lot of chatter out there about the site plan, so we wanted to show you the site plan, so if you had any concerns, we could hear it before we amend the agreement and attach that site plan.
And I can certainly speak to the undercutting, because we've watched, particularly with all the rains we've had, we see the peninsula end, and it has major undercuts now because they've raised and lowered the level so much with everything that's gone on. So we have something of interest to see every day when we look out our windows. So what they're dealing with is a difficult situation, is what I'm trying to explain. So I'm not, it's kind of funny in one way, but not when you're having to set up a project like they are.
So any concerns from the council about the plan and the agreement?
No.
So then we'll finalize the site plan and the agreement, bring that probably to the Parks and Rec Board for a recommendation, and then the council for approval.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a safe week.
Thank you. The next item is a resolution for sale, alcohol sale and consumption for the Riverkeeper Foundation's RiverFest event. And this is a follow-up from the discussion we had at the retreat. So this is just the language. It's actually an ordinance, excuse me, it's not a resolution, for the event that is currently planned for May the 9th. Based on our next topic, that might be postponed, but this would be at the Kevin Lofton Riverfront Park on May the 9th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it follows our normal rules for a large special event, assuming that they still have this event on March the 9th.
May the 9th.
Excuse me, May the 9th, thank you. you would need to approve this ordinance to allow them to have alcohol sales and consumption. And as of right now, they're planning to have that event. I know Cassidy's been talking with the Riverkeeper today about this, and so it most likely will be rescheduled, but assuming that it is May the 9th, this ordinance would need to be approved so that they can continue with their planning.
Let me ask this, if we were to approve, and read the language of the ordinance, it says May 9th, so if we were to approve this and it was postponed as opposed to say obviously if it's canceled, it's, this is a moot point. If it were postponed based on the language of the ordinance, we would then have to pass another ordinance for whatever day they
reschedule it.
Yeah.
Which we're probably, based on what I'm going to tell you at the next item, we'll need to do that again for some of the concerts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not serving Corona beer at this event, are they?
Well, I mean, I have no problem passing the resolution. I mean, I think it'll likely be moot, but,
It might not.
It might
You'll have it in hand.
Right.
Yeah.
So the only way for them to have the event on May the 9th and have the alcohol sales and consumption like they did last September would be for you to approve this ordinance. Then if they need to postpone that event to another time, we would just come back and amend the ordinance. So this does require action.
All right, well, I'd move that we approve the ordinance allowing alcoholic beverage sales at the Riverkeeper Foundation RiverFest, tentatively scheduled for May the 9th.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries.
Thank you. I guess technically Ryan was not excused from the meeting. So there would be a 5-0 vote. Correct. Thank you.
Very good.
I'm learning.
Yeah, it has to be in the affirmative.
Unless it were like a zoning vote or something like that.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to give you, the next item is an update on the coronavirus. So I wanted to just give you a brief overview of what we've done. This is the first chance we've had to actually meet face-to-face instead of just a group text and email.
Pointed at that. Yeah, pointed down there.
Okay. So yesterday, Gaston County declared a state of emergency, and that state of emergency went into effect yesterday. It limits public gatherings to no more than 50 people, so 50 or fewer people. It has specific exemptions in the language. It exempted schools, healthcare facilities, daycares, government offices, and business operations. So if you're one of those groups, then you can't have more than 50 people there. But certainly large gatherings like a festival are not allowed. Also on, I guess, Saturday, the state closed all public schools for 2 weeks. So schools closed this week and next week. And we'll see what happens after that. There was a conference call of county leadership and municipal leadership this afternoon. In that, it was agreed upon that business gatherings would be limited to 50 people as well. And so that would be bars and restaurants, movie theaters, 50 people per theater, restaurants, 50 people in a restaurant, other shopping centers, other places where the public would gather, and a private business would be limited to 50 people. Now, for restaurants, certainly the county commissioners and leadership and the municipal leadership understood that this could have an economic impact. And I think Nellie's has already said that they're not allowing patrons inside the building. You can get a takeout order. Chick-fil-A at Belmont has done the same thing. So you can only get through the drive-through. So some restaurants are going further than what the county is doing. But the county certainly is encouraging people to get takeout or delivery from a restaurant. But if you go to a restaurant, we're asking the restaurant owners and managers to limit the seating capacity to 50 people. Or if it's even a smaller restaurant, 50 people would be kind of packed to have that social distancing of 6 feet. So the county is working with the health department on how to word that, and they'll hopefully have that done by the end of the day or tomorrow. But the idea would be this would go into effect at midnight Wednesday evening.
Is that going to be a firm requirement or just asking really nicely?
It is a firm requirement that they're asking people to police themselves. But if restaurants, so we'll start this with education first, sending the word out to the restaurant owners and managers, asking them to comply with it. If they have 51 people, we'll just say, please keep it to 50 people. If they are not going to comply and they refuse to comply, then the county has the enforcement. The county police and municipal police will have the authority to enforce it.
Yeah, because it's just been my observation that most people don't do it when they're asked nicely. It kind of got to be required before change in behavior.
Yes.
Yep, worldwide.
Yes. So along with this, the county decided to go ahead and require fitness centers and gyms to close. Bars that don't sell food need to close. Grocery stores will not have any restrictions because they are certainly needed. And there was concern that if you were to close restaurants, and everybody would go to the grocery store, and the system's just not set up for that.
So, but as I understand it, at least in Belmont, are there any pure bars under that definition? It seems like all of the places that we would call...
would be the only one.
What was it?
The jailhouse.
Oh, yeah. Because I mean, like Sammy's or any of those places, they could seat, I guess, 50 people and serve, but they're restaurants and bars.
Right. So so the differentiation would be people need food, and so you can give up a pure alcohol business for the time being during this emergency. But the county and the new county attorney are working out the language, and so they'll get that to us as soon as they have that. And they want to spend tomorrow really getting the word out to the restaurants and getting them. They gives them 2 days to kind of get a plan in place for how to staff this up.
What about the ABC store? Is that?
It's not a bar.
No.
It's a retail establishment.
Okay, so there's still retail establishments.
But probably would need to limit occupancy to 50 people or fewer. So if you want to volunteer to be security for them.
I've got other things on my plate, I'm afraid.
You're busy that day?
Yeah.
Okay.
But are there still no positive cases in the county as of?
As of our conference call, yes.
That's right.
Well, the other thing we're hearing even at school today is that we're looking more at 8 weeks as opposed to 2. Of course, it's not official, but that's what they're telling us to plan for.
And so, sorry. Also, we have canceled all of our events for March, including the Belmont Blooms Parade, the Arbor Day event. But it looks like a lot of the towns are already canceling their activities for April, and the CDC did recommend canceling or postponing your events for the next 8 weeks. So we haven't talked about each specific event, but we probably just need to cancel everything for March and April at this point.
I would recommend, me personally, I would recommend following CDC guidelines on this.
Yes.
I would rather err on the side of caution than in hindsight have people say, well, you should have done this.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, as far as the state and the county, I know they've sent down their recommendation of mandates. What authority, if any, do they give local municipalities to act on their own if they see fit?
So we have the authority as a municipality to do our own emergency declaration with restrictions that are outlined in the statute. So far, we are included with the county declaration, but if we wanted to go further than the county, there's some provisions, and it regulates movement of people, sale of alcohol, access to public buildings, but we would need to have our own emergency declaration. And then
Didn't something just limit to 20 people?
the president, and that's what, I'm sorry, I was texting through the first part of the meeting, not that I wasn't paying attention to what you were saying, but the president apparently had a press conference this afternoon and recommended public gatherings to no more than 10 people. So I was asking the county manager how that affected what we're looking at, so we're working on all of this.
Says avoid gathering in groups of more than 10 people, avoid discretionary travel, and avoid eating and drinking at bars, restaurants, and public food courts.
Okay. And that's a recommendation, not a regulation or a mandate. So what we have done as a city staff, is, again, canceling the events in April and March. That would include the first Friday Night Live, which would be April 24th, and the Garibaldi Fest, which would be April 25th. We'll discuss whether, particularly the Friday Night Live, we'd like to reschedule that, probably tack it on to the end of the season, or maybe do that in the fall. The Garibaldi Fest, we'll see if we just want to reschedule that, or if we just cancel that. We'll work on all those logistics. I've asked our Public Works Director to make sure that, particularly with school being out for the next 2 weeks and the weather being nice, our parks are going to be inundated with children. Let's clean the playground equipment twice a day. Let's clean the public restrooms in the parks twice a day.
Would it be, just a thought?
Yes.
Would it be possible, I've seen those like stands at the state fair with the hand sanitizer. Like, is it possible to get something like that at some of the heavier usage parks?
Yes, and David has ordered those. They're not widely available right now.
Right.
But we have ordered those, and so we'll be installing the little pump hand sanitizer stations in the restroom buildings, and then the freestanding ones that will be out by the playground areas, we'll mount those into the concrete. If we don't secure them, they will certainly walk away.
Right,
Well,
yeah.
Just kind of maybe tying into that, I mean, this may sound facetious, but I went to 5 different locations today to find some paper towels and toilet paper, because it just never occurred to me that there would be a run on toilet paper, and nobody has any. We have public restrooms. I mean, I guess we have some sort of policy in place. I don't know what sort of supply we have on hand, but I guess we would have to close our public restrooms at some point if we can't.
If we can't maintain
paper
an
products.
adequate supply of paper products, we would close the restrooms, yes, sir. And we talked about that, if it gets down to there's only a finite amount of toilet paper and paper towels and everything else that we need for public safety, and we need it for the police department, the fire department, the public works, for internal use versus having it for the restrooms, we may just need to close those public restrooms.
Which sounds crazy, but you guys have to have it here.
Yes. Otherwise, we can't operate without basic necessities here. We want to make sure, I don't want to close the parks, and there's no recommendation to close parks. It is to limit gatherings in parks to no more than 50 people. But as a parent with kids at home, they need to get out and burn some energy, or else everybody will be in bad shape. So I want them to be able to go to the parks, but I want to make sure that we keep our parks as sanitary as possible. And of course, we'll ask parents to bring hand sanitizer and take some responsibility for their children as well. We've canceled all non-essential work meetings. So Shelley and I had a couple meetings this week. We've said, don't come to City Hall and meet with us. We'll do a telephone call, video conference. We'll find a way to conduct business, but we're just not going to do it in person. We've talked with our advisory board, staff liaisons, Main Street Board. I think they're going to do a conference call this week, maybe. Parks and Rec Board will do a conference call. Environmental Sustainability Board will cancel that meeting. So we don't want to do in-person meetings for the time being. Obviously, we've moved this meeting to City Hall. We'll need to figure out how to handle public comment for future city council meetings. April meeting, probably the May meeting, and then maybe past then. It sounds like with our zoning schedule, we're not going to have public hearings at the April council meeting, but we may have one at the May, we may have several at the May meeting.
Right.
So we'll need to figure all that out, how to do that safely. And the school government is got some good advice on how to do that. And other cities are experimenting right now with it. The county said they don't have any public hearings scheduled until the end of May. So they've sort of pushed all that work out. So we want to be cognizant of that. Down. And then, so internally, we met this morning. I told the department heads to figure out which department or which staff members can work remotely and work from home that don't have to have either public interaction or staff interaction. We can transfer our office phones to our mobile phones, and because they're both with Verizon, we've just switched over from VC3 to Apex, so that included new laptop computers, so we have the technology and the tools available. So those staff that can work from home should be able to work from home. those that have school-age children that need to be at home for the kids because the school's out, they can take vacation time, as that's basically following our inclement weather policy. We're trying to stagger work schedules as we can, just to get some separation. Social distancing, the 6-foot rule, that's why we changed the arrangement here of the chairs, just to kind of visualize what that looks like. We're going to try to do that within our departments as best we can. Obviously, we still have to have, firefighters have to demand the fire truck, and still have to have staff working closely together, but we'll work on where we can to have social distancing. Certainly encourage people to do that. One thing I don't have the authority to do, but I wanted to ask you, I mentioned it maybe in the email or a text, everything's kind of running together at this point. Following the lead of Charlotte and Gastonia and now Bessemer City and Cherville and Mount Holly and maybe Kings Mountain, is not disconnecting our utility customers, water and sewer customers for non-payment this month and likely next month as well. I think today was the deadline. Yesterday for payments at a late fee.
Yeah, today anybody that pays today or later gets a late fee.
But if you still don't pay by the 22nd, then we would cut you off on the 23rd. You're okay that we just not disconnect that. And this time, I don't want people without water because then they can't wash their hands.
Sure. Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, and then, and also we've had some pushback about closing City Hall. You can't pay your water bill in person. Don't want to pay the $2.95 online fee that the credit card company charges. Although we do let you pay by mail, by telephone, but there's a fee. Online through WaterSmart, but with a fee. You can do automatic draft at no fee. You can drop it off at the 2 drop boxes at City Hall at no fee. But we saw a lot of people that just want to come in because that's what they're used to doing. So I'd like for us to switch over, and for the time being, the city just absorb that $2.95 processing fee just to remove a barrier for people paying online.
Yeah.
It's not a huge amount of money, but it's better than somebody coming in here and bringing a coronavirus with them, or being exposed to something that may be here that they don't need to be exposed to.
That's fine.
Well, I mean, the upside might be people that are reticent to do it after they try it may continue with that.
Yes, and we will still push the automatic draft. That's the best way because it's no charge to them at all, and it's automatic. You don't have to think about it. And we will push the WaterSmart as well. But if you're okay with us not disconnecting for non-payment and for the city to absorb the credit card fee, we can do that.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. And of course, we're washing our hands and frequently touched items like doorknobs and whatnot. Trying to keep all that clean. This, like I said yesterday, this is a fast-moving situation. We've got new information now that we didn't have this morning when I met with staff, so we will keep monitoring this and let you know what's going on. It may be that we have to postpone city council meetings or figure out a different way to meet, but we'll work through all that. Let you know, and just please, if people have questions and they ask you, just send them to me, and we'll try to figure out what's going on.
I would think, and I'm sure you're already doing this, to the extent anything is not essential to be on a city council agenda, that we push it to a time that perhaps normalcy can be restored, because I certainly, I read the link that Mark found, and that, there was a lot of useful stuff in there, but even there was some uncertainty, and I'd hate to have something be questioned or litigated as to whether it was proper, because was there public comment? Does this count as being present to vote if we do it on Skype? I mean, those are definitely things that we're going to have to talk about by April 6th, I think, is our next regular meeting. But to the extent something is not something that has to be addressed immediately, perhaps we could save it for a time when some of those procedural irregularities have vanished.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I was a little hesitant to even have this workshop, but we had already scheduled it with these applicants, and
the guy came from Ohio.
Yeah, so didn't want to. But yeah, we'll look, I don't know what's going to be on the April agenda, but
I mean,
we'll look at.
as far as public comment and voting, I mean, we would have to look to you and Parks to find out if we have to do it remotely, is, the legality of the process. I mean, I think if we put our agenda out sooner online and just let it be known that public comment might be restricted to, if you have a comment, you need to email it in.
I think that was actually one of the suggestions.
Ahead of time, so it can be considered.
Oh, that's absolutely what they talked about in the link. It's just that there is that degree of uncertainty that if somebody wanted to be particularly litigious.
Would it help if we enacted a local emergency declaration for stuff like that? Because I feel like legally, if something were to get challenged, if we can say, well, we did actually have.
Can that be umbrellaed under a declaration?
Say that better.
I'm not sure.
We'll look at that, and if we need to, that could be on the
Yeah,
April
because I
agenda.
wouldn't be opposed to doing something like that.
And
As far as I'm aware, there's only certain things you can include.
Right.
You're limited.
And you can
to what
limit the
states
time,
you
too.
can include in it.
And you approved an emergency declaration ordinance prior to Hurricane Florence, so we'll need to look at that again and see what authority we
Well, I
have.
don't think did any of us actually do that, I know. What was that?
That was 2 years ago.
Florence? Oh, I'm getting it confused with Floyd. I'm
No.
sorry.
But yeah, so.
I don't know if we ever enacted that, or if we just had it ready to.
I think we adopted the ordinance that allowed us to have our separate emergency declaration, but I think we just never enacted the ordinance. I mean, we didn't enact the
So having
declaration.
us included in the counties,
It
it
is
opens us to
sufficient.
state funding and that kind of stuff. And so basically, all of that just applies to all of our residents. So that covers us from a statewide standpoint, and a countywide standpoint, from being, so if you don't declare a state of emergency, or if you're not included in the county, then you're not available for certain types of FEMA funding and other types of funding. The only reason you would declare it here locally is to put more restrictions on the people of Belmont, and it's only within the city limits.
Yeah.
And there's only a certain list of things that you can declare in that, and enact in that.
But we'll see if, sort of the procedural part of the council meeting is something that's allowed to be included. If not, then my suggestion would be for the April meeting, if we don't have any public hearings, then the public comment, people have from now until April the 6th, I'd ask them to send me email me their public comment, whatever they would want to say for 3 minutes. I'll be glad to sit here and read it out loud to you. That way it's live streamed, it's recorded, it makes it into the minutes. But I don't think the statute says that you have to be present to give an oral public comment, and you just have to have an opportunity to provide a public comment. So we'll get clarity on that.
Will we use the minute timer?
Yes.
And you have to go out once a month.
Once,
yes.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be at the regular scheduled meeting, it can be at the workshop. Things are.
Yeah.
And so,
So our meetings have to be held once a month in public comment, but doesn't say when that meeting has to be held?
No.
So if you wanted to defer it to the end of April,
We could just have a special meeting for.
The regular meeting's set. You don't have to have public comment once a month, so if you can have that public comment section at another meeting if you have more than one meeting a month.
okay.
Okay.
so we will keep you updated on
All right.
this activity. That is all that I have for you.
I have one personal thing. I'm working on a letter to try to secure some private funding for the skateboard park. Since this is the year that's going to actually be an Olympic event, to me, this is the appropriate time, and I'm doing that personally, but I wanted to let the council know. I certainly don't think I'll be able to raise enough to handle the whole situation, but at least maybe to push it a little bit farther forward, knowing that most of our monies are going to be spent for the Parks and Rec Center. Just wanted to let you know that.
What is it for, Martha?
Skateboard park.
Skateboard.
It's going to be in the Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah.
So,
I hate
skateboarding.
to bring this up, but I mean, I guess we talked about live streaming, and what if, heaven forbid, one of us should fall ill? Have we talked about procedures to deal with? I mean, I guess we probably couldn't meet in person in that case.
If you develop any symptoms of this, then stay away from us, because I won't be here if you're in this room with it.
Yeah.
you will need to self-quarantine for 14 days. And so you could participate remotely. We do have the remote participation policy, so you could call in from home and participate.
And there's rules around that, so like,
Yeah.
if you were to create the quorum, you can't create the quorum for being electronic.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's have to be enough of the rest of the council here.
Mhm.
to
Physically
create a-
present?
Physically
Yeah, you
present
had
to
to
create
be-
a quorum. And that's in the general statutes, actually. That's one of
Yes.
the gray areas
And
right now.
but the mayor doesn't count as toward the.
Oh, well, we
The
can,
mayor does
He
count.
does count, so we had to have
Yes.
4 members present.
plus the mayor,
Yeah.
or 3 members plus the mayor.
Yes.
Yeah.
3 plus the mayor.
I'll be here sick or not. No, I'm just kidding.
No, sir, you will not.
You'll be here by yourself if
In the event
that's.
that you don't have a quorum, then what is the policy? You just cancel the
We just,
meeting?
yeah, we just can't have the meeting. You know, if we know in advance, we can get the word out.
Hopefully it won't come to that.
Hopefully that won't come to that.
Anybody else have any other comments like to make? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Good job, Adrian.
Shelley.
I think it's John hanging tough with
I got my shrimp cocktail sauce and my,
I mean, don't
cheese
tell you,
vegetables.
I would hold them to 1.8 million. Surprise.